Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to give you a very quick overview of benchmarking with safety culture approaches. It is a very complex topic, and I'm just going to skim the top for you. And it's going to be very fast. I'd like to leave you with a lot of images. And if you're interested in the slides afterwards, I'm happy to provide the slides with you, to give you a bit of an opportunity to review. Imagine your organization consists of intersections. Imagine an intersection as a company. There's lots of things moving. There is a whole range of equipment moving, people moving. It's a very busy production process. And then things like this occur. Or this, keep your eye on the red arrow, the lane. Just if you don't believe it happened, there it is in slow motion. Or this one. Now, if you were an organization, none of these events would have formed part of your database. It would not be reported. It's all hidden. It's not needed to be reported and can be easily hidden away. And yet these are events that are indicative of what happens in the organization. And we don't have them. High potential incidents that are not reported. Now, if you think about the organizations that I've just shown you, in all of those situations, everybody arrived alive. Nobody got hurt. Everybody goes home in the same way they came to work. We've achieved 0 injuries, 0 accidents, 0 harm. Now, how do you benchmark one organization, one intersection, to another, where you don't have valid information about indicate the realities that we sit with when we measure and benchmark with indicators in our organizations? There's 3 important ones: reliability, validity, and measurability. And if you look at validity, what's the level of precision of the instrument? Can it predict information? Can it predict other indices? Reliability, can it be used by different people? And can it be used over time again, and it's delivering the same results? And then measurability, is it useful? Is it available? And this leads to the importance of data. There's a 4th indicator. Now, if you look at how we would benchmark between organizations, and we use lost time injury rates, we use KPIs, we use leading indices, we use HPIs and HPHs. They all sit at the top end there, at the visible end, where they are largely unreliable, invalid. But they are very important, and they're very easy to measure, and that's why we use them. Now, if you change the importance index around, and we start talking about safety culture, a topic that is very much coming into the field, increasingly, as you've seen with different presentations. Safety culture is very much an analysis process that gives you an insight into the upstream side of the organization. But it's not so easy to measure. It's actually very hard. And when you look at a metric that would actually give you all of those: high reliability, validity, easy to measure, and not too complex. Let's have a look at the science of surveys. This is very much famous work now of Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, where he basically says fast thinking is in the forefront of people's minds or organizations' minds, and slow thinking is the rational level of our thinking. And I know very simplistically. But if you look at the actions of a person, a worker at the front end, conveyor belt, there's a rag in the rollers there. What is going to drive that behavior of that person at that moment? Is it the fast-thinking behavior, or is it the slow thinking mode, or is it the fast-thinking mode? If it's the fast-thinking mode, that's where risk-taking exists. The person may just reach in and grab the rag and get injured. In the slow-thinking mode, the person will lock out and tag out and stop the conveyor and then do the action. Now, very critically important, what do we measure when we measure culture in an organization? We actually measure the slow thinking mode. We give people questionnaires, and they are with Likert scales, and they have a variety of biases and problems that make them invalid for a culture analysis. And here's some of them. We all know the typical pencil whipping approach that comes out in surveys like this. Or we have a number of other psychometric biases. One is the so-called desirability bias, where people tell you what they think you want to know. And why do they do that? Because they have time to think about their responses. Very, very simple. They would construct answers for you. There's agreement biases. People just respond in agreement with statements. Some people tend to respond only by disagreeing. A large group of people respond in the central of questionnaires. Simple bias. But then there's the interpretation error. If you look at that statement, this comes out of a very well-known safety culture survey. Those in charge of safety have the authority to make the changes they have identified as necessary. Agree or disagree. Or I highly agree on a scale of a Likert scale. Now, if you look at that, there's actually 5 or 6 different things in that statement. Those in charge, who are they? What is safety? How do you measure that? Do they have the authority to make changes that they have identified as necessary? There are a convolution of topics in that one single statement that renders that single item invalid to be a measurement of safety culture. Or reading errors. A lot of people have reading limitations, and as a result of that, they have a lot of measurement error. These cultural surveys are simply not cultural surveys. They're opinion surveys, and it's a whole different thing. When you look at what are the types of culture that exist, or is being seen as 2 views of safety culture, one is the interpretative approach, and that is mostly an academics approach that says culture is something that you are, it cannot be created or changed, cannot be measured. The functionalist approach says it's something that you have, can be created, and it can be measured. And I want to show you how these measurements can be done. We've developed various methodologies to conduct a cultural survey. I'll show you why I say it's a cultural survey. And the one in the middle there is the prism of voice. And basically people access on site the questionnaires with QR codes on their phones or through their computers. But essentially it is containing a time-out run, a run-out timer on the statement. There's no scales to answer. It's a very straightforward statement, and in the workplaces we are poorly protected from being injured. Now, if you look at the run-out timer starts to run, and there is a voice that actually also reads out that statement to a person. And in this way, there is no time for the respondents to think. They have to respond intuitively. And that way, we capture the actual intuitive response, the system A or fast thinking mode. Now, in terms of what do we measure? We measure a range of very important indices: psychological safety, risk readiness, integration of safety and operations, the strength of culture, the maturity, and the alignment. And I'll just show you some of those that we do. The measurement of strength, that's actually the model of culture that we use, has actually been designed and developed here in Australia. In 1999, the Australian Minerals Council commissioned SAFEmap to conduct a survey of the mining industry in Australia. 42 mines participated, and we developed this methodology and this model to conduct surveys in the industry since then. And it has been reported internationally at the time. And it's the model that has evolved from that. Today we have, on this database, more than 2 million people around the world in different industries. Over 1,500 companies, large and small, have participated in the surveys. and we have a very powerful database against which comparisons can be made. And that's the model. It has 46 factors in various groups, and they are all arranged into 12 broad indicators. And I won't be able to go through all the indicators, but they are ranging from perceptions of commitment in the organization, trust in leadership, pressures of risk-taking, employee stressors, a whole range of factors that are being measured. And each one of those 46 factors have got a positive and a negative statement randomly arranged in the survey that people simply respond, I agree or disagree with, in the way that I showed you. And it delivers these kind of heat maps. If it's green, it means the responses in that category is equal to top companies in our database. If it's red, it's equal to bottom industry response levels. And so you have a very clear indication of exactly what happens in a snapshot in your organization culturally on the 12 indicators by job level and in a whole range of metrics that can be sliced and diced in any shape or form. Psychological safety, a very well-known concept, and as you know, very much the concept by Amy Edmondson. We measure this from the metrics, from the factors in our model. We basically use the work of James Reason, who preceded Amy Edmondson in psychological safety. When he defined the various types of culture in an organization, and what we've done is from our model, we selected a range of factors that can actually measure the psychological safety in the organization, the extent to which the organization is able to learn, flexible, just in their response to failures, and trusting and caring in their approach to the employees. And various ways in which this can be displayed, heat maps and so on. The alignment is a fairly new concept, not a new, but a more recent concept in culture. How aligned or coupled are the various levels of the organization in their response patterns? How tightly or loosely coupled is the culture in the organization? And we do this by looking at the response patterns and have algorithms to measure that, and measuring, this is the response pattern at the front line, as against the supervisor level, as against the management level, and it can be quite diverse. That's a loosely coupled organizational culture. If it's more tightly coupled or very tightly coupled, it is an organization that has a high index of alignment or coupling. And we can express that in very precise terms. At the top, you see the top companies in our database, who has a 76% alignment between levels, and this particular example, 45%, it ranges down to 12%. But this is a mathematical expression of the coupling in the organization. This drives behavior in more or lower levels. I want to share with you also a more recent development. This is the maturity assessment. And we all know the various models of cultural maturity, increasing trust, increasing transparency, the Hudson model or the Shell model, the Bradley curve, very similar. These models are very well known, but they fall short, in my opinion, on two areas. One is in the extent to which the processes in the organization is random or integrated, and whether the focus in the organization is extrinsic or intrinsic, and whether the organization focuses on outcomes and results or on values in the organization, and very much the topic of discussion these days. Now, if you look at those two axes, you get various levels of organizational maturity that we express in this way. And they sit on the model that is similar to the Hudson model or the Bradley curve, but based on the extent to which there is an increasing level of focus on values in the organization and an increasing level of integration between operations and safety. Two very powerful indices. And that delivers a next level of organizational maturity that we call regenerative. Now, this is the model that we've developed with Nike, one of our biggest clients. Nike, as you know, is a very large organization. They have hundreds of factories that supply them with shoes and apparel around the world. And they had no way of, how do we compare the safety performance of these factories? And they've approached us to use safety culture maturity. And this is, you can see there's a very clever model there. Spectator, participant, Olympian, record holder, the legend, basically on our model, increasing in terms of maturity and the levels of integration in the organization. So this is an example of how we measure for the organization, and they have developed a range of criteria that specifies what will make up a safety mature organization. And we've developed statements, perception survey statements, based on those criteria. There are 30 statements, and here's the difference in measurement. The measurement is with high and low maturity statements in the model. So randomly arranged, people access to their phones in different languages, in various languages that Nike works in globally, and they simply respond in that timer method that I showed you, and with that we can calculate with our algorithms the extent to which the organization or groups within the organization is either high maturity or low maturity in their overall levels. And you can see in this example, the managers responded at the high mature level, the workers at a very low mature level. But this basically can give the organization a snapshot of where they sit in terms of maturity. Now, in the United States, we put this also in the utility industry, where we use the model of the Institute of Nuclear Power Organizations, and also a model with high maturity, low maturity statements in it. And we measure also a model that we've also developed over the years with our model. And we can then provide the organizations with this kind of quantitative metric around the maturity of the organization. This can, of course, be measured across all different kinds of indices, job levels, job departments, various indices in the organization. And you can do this for a whole organization with a large sample, and this is an organization that participated very fully, up to, in this case, 75% people participate in the survey. But that's fairly hard work to let everybody participate. We also can do this with a small sample in the organization, just by job level, and you can still develop a metric on maturity in that organization by using small samples, in this case, about 14% samples. This whole process delivers a whole range of capabilities to not only analyze the culture in the organization, but to be able to measure against other organizations in a valid way. You can truly measure apples with apples, compare apples with apples. You can compare organizations in mining with organizations in manufacturing. You can compare large and small organizations in ways that you cannot do when you use lagging indicators in those organizations. This is an example of a response of one of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States, Southern Company. They very large organization. I think they are 15th in the Fortune 500 ranking. And they've conducted with us a comprehensive analysis of benchmarking. They have 5 or 6 different companies underneath Southern Company. And in this way, they've developed a benchmarking process. And this is the response from the CEO of the organization.
Over the last couple of days about Southern's safety journey. We are transforming. We may not even know everything that we need to know and be making that complete transformation in exactly the right way, but we knew we needed more assistance and more knowledge. And I'm thankful the rest of our safety team for putting together a process and saying the first thing we really need to do is understand our safety culture. And they reviewed the expertise and experiences of several groups, and we ended up hiring SAFEmap, who has changed our world. And we had actually just sort of executed an employee survey last fall, and over 25,000 of our employees. So that was terrific. People care. People wanted to weigh in. People wanted to be heard. We changed our entire pay structure around. And in fact, a pay goal this year for Southern is that all of its executives will go through a training process with Corrie and his team. And that has been remarkable. We all have to get on the same page. We all have to use the same vocabulary. We all need to understand some of the principles that we have held near for years, maybe decades.
The organization has had a dramatic shift in direction once they've started focusing not on the indices that are lagging of performance lagging indicators, but when they started focusing and their pay structure on how do they actually equip their senior management, their middle management to constantly generate and change culture in organizations. The model that I want to end with is a little video clip that I find extremely valuable. The American aircraft carriers, very much an organization that drives culture very powerfully on their ships because every 5 years their employees are new. And the jets land on these decks and they have to catch a cable with a hook on the jet. And it comes down, catches the cable, and they have to move it out of the way because the next jet is landing in 42 seconds. And they do this 24/7 every day. And they seldom have accidents on these high risk organizations. And when they do have an accident, this happens.
As this single-seat FA-18 Hornet traps, the arresting cable stretches to the breaking point. When it breaks, the plane quickly disappears over the side and into the water. Training saves the pilot, who ejects immediately. This yellow shirt miraculously jumps the cable as it whips under him, not once, but twice.
That action and behavior of that employee, that soldier there, is not luck. It is the result of decades of systemic drive of the right culture in the organization, a powerful one that enables everybody in the organization to be, and this is, I believe, is a very powerful definition of safety. It is the readiness to respond to risks relentlessly. And if you change your definition of safe to that definition, you'll drive your whole focus upstream in the organization and ensure that you create the culture in the organization that drives the safety performance and the performance of the organization in very, very powerful ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corrie. That was definitely a session that sort of made me think about, I guess, our organisation and our industry and where we sit, and that certainly made you think. I'll just put it out there if anyone's got any questions for Corrie. Looks like you get off pretty free, mate. I thought there would have been heaps.
There's one back there.
Oh yeah, there's one up the back in the blue shirt, please.
Corrie, thank you very much. I think that was excellent. Corrie, I just have a question for you. Did you have time, or have you done any studies to overlay companies that have embarked on this journey on that same initial graph that you've put up the front, and see how they perform now in terms of outcomes, ultimately, if we pursue this direction?
Well, the short answer is no, we haven't done that. The organization, that whole industry was extremely sensitive when this graph came out and had become very cagey about that particular graph because the high performing organizations in terms of the traditional indices were the ones that had killed the most people. And so that has become a bit of a sensitive issue in the whole industry at the moment. There's a big shift in the United States now away from lagging indicators to much more focus on cultural drivers in organizations.
Thank you, Corrie.
Okay, we've got time for one more question if anyone's got one. No? Okay, I'd like you to thank Corrie for his good presentation. So,
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.